everyone, thank you for stopping by on my channel. My name is Ninja, actually Nina, but you could also call me Nee or Neen, and I do cruelty-free makeup. So I finally received my ABH Subculture Palette. Delivery played me dirty, so it took forever and a day to arrive, but now it's finally here. And up to this day, I already saw like a million reviews on this palette. They are very mixed. Some people love it, some people hate it. Can't wait to try it out for myself and see how it works. But since there are already so many reviews and first impressions on this palette, I didn't want to do another one of these. So I decided to go for something slightly different. And in fact, when I saw this palette for the first time, it reminded me so much of the Jeffree Androgyny palette. So in this video, I'm going to compare both of these palettes in case of swatches and also how they work on my eyes. So then I can give you an impression if these are really dupes, if one of them performs better than the other, or if they are so different that you probably need both of them in your life. So if you're interested in seeing me comparing the Subculture palette with the Androgyny palette, keep on watching. Now let's go quickly over the palette setup, and we're going to start with the Subculture one. This is how it looks like. It comes with 14 different shades. One of them is metallic, 2 are duochrome, and the rest is all matte. And it also comes with a little brush. And this palette retails for $42 in the US, £42 in the UK, and this translates to 46 euros. Now with the Jeffree Androgyny palette, it has 10 different shades, 2 of them are metallic and 8 are matte. It retails for $45 in the US, £40 in the UK, and 43 euros and 70 cents. Now, if you put those palettes next to each other, you can see that the Androgyny one is way bigger than the Subculture palette. And also, if you compare the pan sizes, you can see that these are way bigger than the ones in this palette. But you get 4 more shades in here and also a brush, so I feel like you get kind of the same value, considering that you pay pretty much the same price for them. So I feel like it all comes down to how good they actually perform on the eyes. So before I'm actually going to put these shadows to the test on my eyes, I'm going to swatch the similar looking shades next to each other so we can see if they're really dupes or not. So here we have the neutral transition shades, and this one is Dawn from the Subculture palette, and this is Safe Word from the Androgyny palette. And as you can see, they're actually not too similar. The Dawn one looks a little bit more peachy orange, and Safe Word is a little bit more cool toned. Next we have Destiny and Military, which are both army greens, but you can see that Destiny from the Anastasia palette is a little bit darker than Military from the Jeffree Star one. Here we have Adorn and Deja Vu, and you can see that Deja Vu, the one from the Androgyny palette, is a little bit more like a brick reddish kind of color compared to the Adorn shade. Here we have All Star and Fetish, and I'm sorry if my swatches look ugly. I'm just not the best person at swatching. But you can see they're both kind of dark burgundy shades, but they still do look very different in tone. All Star, which is the one on the left, actually looks way more purple on the skin than it does in the pan. And here we have Access and Swallow, and I do have to say that these are the closest dupes so far. The only thing is that Access from the Anastasia palette is slightly more tealish than blue, but you can barely tell a difference between the two. So now I have to go on with my other arm, and as you can see, my hand is a fucking mess. So here we have Electric and Frosting, and they both don't really show up on camera that good. But you can see that Electric has a little bit of a green yellowish sheen to it, so they also aren't exact dupes. By the way, this one is the Electric shade from the Anastasia palette, and this one is the Jeffree Star one, which is called Frosting. And next we have Fudge from the ABH palette, and then Dominatrix from the Androgyny palette. These are pretty much the same. They are just a basic warm toned brownish color. And here we have the orangey shades, which are called New Wave and Charm, and they also look pretty much the same. Okay, so as there's not enough space on my arm, I'm gonna film this weird ass angles. So here we have Untamed from the Subculture palette and Poison from the Androgyny palette. And they are very close, but I just realized that the shade Poison is even more similar to the shade Access. So I'm going to swatch these two next to each other as well. So here we have Poison on top and Access below. And the only thing I have to say is that I feel like Access is a little bit more pigmented and Poison is a little bit more building up to get to this intensity. And the last two shades that we're going to compare are Rowdy and Androgyny, and they actually don't have anything in common except for the fact that they are purple eyeshadows, so they are definitely not dupes. But then again, I realized that the shade All Star, which is on top, looks pretty much the same as Androgyny, so these two are definitely more of a dupe than Rowdy and Androgyny. So I just washed off the swatches, including the mess that I created. I had eyeshadow on my stomach. Don't ask me how, don't ask me why the fuck that happened, but I just realized that I'm not going to be a professional swatcher anytime soon. So one thing I do want to mention about the Subculture palette that I've noticed while swatching is it actually doesn't have as much fallout as I expected. If you've watched any reviews on this palette, the biggest complaint that people have is that it has so much fallout and you have to be extremely careful and delicate while touching it. I actually did put in a normal amount of pressure that I would do with any other eyeshadow that I swatched, and it didn't break, it didn't had like a crazy amount of fallout. I mean, yeah, some shades were a little bit more powdery than others, but nothing like crazy, nothing uncommon, nothing that I wouldn't experience with any other eyeshadow palette. So I don't know what the deal is about that. I've heard that there are probably some good and some bad batches of the palette, so probably I was just lucky and received a good one, but I don't even know if that is true. So I didn't have problems with crazy fallout on this palette whatsoever. So now I'm gonna put those shades to the test that actually did look identical while I swatched them, and I'm gonna use this eye for the Subculture palette and this eye for the Jeffree Star Androgyny palette. And I'm gonna start with the orangey shades in my crease. Okay, so this one is definitely crazy pigmented. This is the New Wave shade by ABH. It does blend out nicely, so that's great. So now I'm gonna wipe off my brush and go in with the shade Charm from the Androgyny palette. So with this shade, I already know that it is great because I've used this palette so many times. But as I'm putting them next to each other on my eyes, I can see that they aren't as similar as they looked swatched next to each other. The New Wave shade has a little bit more of like an yellowy undertone, while the Charmed shade is slightly more intense and like rich in color. So I am going to try to build up the New Wave shade to get to that intensity as well. Now as I'm building it up, it does become a little bit more intense as well, but it's still not completely the same. So I wouldn't call these two like an exact dupe. So the next shade that I'm going to go in is Fudge. It is a little bit harder to blend out though. It might be the brush. Let me change it because this is actually not a good blending brush anyways. Okay, so it does work better with the other brush, but I still have to say that this is definitely not like a quickly blending shade. It does blend out after a while, but it just needs a little bit more work than other shadows. So then for the other eye, I'm gonna go in with Dominatrix. And it does look pretty much the same in terms of color payoff and pigmentation, but it does blend way easier than the Fudge shade. So I would say we have a winner in this battle. Now I'm gonna go in with one shade that I actually heard very bad things about. Apparently it doesn't blend at all. It has the craziest fallout on earth, and it's the shade All Star. As I'm putting my brush in it, you can see that it does have some fallout. Actually has a lot of fallout. Now I actually don't see how the shadow is hard to be blended out, but I feel like it looks way darker on the eye than it looks in the pen or like swatched on the hands. So this is kind of weird. And then for the other eye, I'm gonna go in with Androgyny. So for my lid, I'm gonna go in with the shade Axis first. And I'm not even gonna use a concealer underneath because I wanna test how pigmented the shade is by itself. I don't know if I like this eyeshadow look that I'm creating, but I just wanna test out all the different shades. So I think I'm probably gonna drag the blue shade over what we just created on the outer corner because it didn't look cute together. And I definitely did bring it up way too close to my inner corner. I never use like blue eyeshadow, so I really don't know what to do with it. So for the Jeffree Star side, we're going to go in with the shade Poison. I feel like this shade is a little bit more forgiving than Axis because it isn't as pigmented and intense. So you kind of have to build it up, which can be a good or a bad thing. I mean, the one has more pigment, which is definitely nice. But then you actually have to be way more careful and it's easier to make mistakes. Now, even though these shades didn't look identical while I swatched them, I still want to try them on. So this is Electric and Frosting. Well, I actually don't know why I did that. They look nothing alike and I actually knew that. So besides that, you can see that my eyes look pretty much identical. So now I'm going to put on some lashes and mascara and come back to my final verdict. Okay, you guys, so now it's time for my final thoughts. Please don't forget to give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you like this video, and leave me a comment if you want. So the first and most important question, are these two dupes for each other? And the answer is no. So even though there are some shades in these palettes that are pretty much identical and could be seen as a dupe, the majority of shades are very different and therefore they can't be seen as dupes. So next question, if I already own the Androgyny palette, should I go out and buy the Subculture palette as well? And this is kind of a tricky question because if you are a makeup lover and collector like myself, you probably do want to have both of these palettes just because you want all the palettes in the world. But if you're like a normal person that doesn't have a crazy makeup addiction, I feel like it is enough if you have one of these palettes because you can create very similar looks with these. And especially those teal bluish colors are probably not like the shades that you wear on an everyday basis. So I would say it is enough if you have one of these palettes. Now, if I would have to decide which of these palettes I would recommend over the other to you guys, this is also kind of tough because I like both of them for different reasons. So let's start with the Subculture one. So what I like about this over the Androgyny palette is definitely that the size of it makes it more travel friendly, as it is small, compact, and it also does have 4 more shades. So it is a little bit more versatile. And it comes with a brush, which I actually tried on my lower lash and it works fine. So this is a good brush that you get with it as well. So now for the Androgyny palette, I feel like that this is actually more beginner friendly because some of the shadows in the Subculture palette were a little bit harder to work with. They took a while to blend them out, and they also, because they were so extremely pigmented, there is definitely more fallout than in this one. I don't really mind it, but if you just start out doing makeup, or also if you don't have that much time to spend too long on your eyeshadow blending, this one is probably the better option for you. It also does have more actual product inside, even though there are less shades, but the pen sizes are just bigger. So I think you'll probably get more use out of this. Yeah, but like I said, I like both of them for different reasons, and I see myself grabbing for both of them in the future. Now, I really hope this video was helpful for you guys, and I see you soon. Bye!